All right, so Box and Whisker plots this one, and I've got an example of a Box and Whisker plot here, and you can pretty much see why they call it a Box and Whisker plot, because you've got a box and it's got whiskers, okay? And you normally plot this on a graph, a little bit of graph paper. Usually you plot it on a cumulative frequency, so you might be asked a question about cumulative frequency. You do your cumulative frequency diagram, and then they might ask you to then plot a Box and Whisker plot on your cumulative frequency diagram and comment on comparing the two bits of data. I will not be using a cumulative frequency today. I will just be looking at a couple of Box and Whisker plots and then commenting on the data. So, first of all, when you see a Box and Whisker plot, on the end here, on this end here, this is where we have our lowest value. So our lowest, whatever it is we're doing. And this is where we have our Q1, our lower quartile. Please make sure you check out the video on cumulative frequency to know what I mean when I say Q1. This is where we have our median or our middle value, or in other words, where we'll find, our average of the data. And again, we like using the median to determine the average because the median is not affected by outliers. So it's not affected by the lowest value or the highest value, but the mean is. Okay, on this end we have our Q3, which is our upper quartile, and last of all, on this end, obviously, is going to be our highest value. Okay, so that's our highest value here. Right, well, all of this means nothing without some information to play around with. So let's move over and start playing with some information and see what comments we make. Over here, I've got some information. So why don't we have a quick chat about this information? So it looks like we would have done a little bit of data gathering. Somebody probably went to a particular profession. Maybe it was teaching, I don't know. And they looked at the salaries that people got. So they basically say, well, okay, in this profession, of all the people we looked at, the lowest salary that we got for the men was $6,500. The highest salary or the highest paid man in our sample data is £44,500. Our lower quartile was 16,000, median is 20,000, and upper quartile is 22,000. Then they did the same thing for the women. Obviously, if you want this to be a good sort of test, or a correct test, then you probably need to test the same job and the same amount of women as you did men. So women, the lowest paid woman had £7,000. Highest paid woman was £33,500, and then we got our Q1, Q2, and Q3 over there. So what we'll do is we'll plot this information onto our box plot and then see what we've got. So what I've done here to prepare us for the box plot was to label the money on here. And obviously it's in thousands of pounds. Even though you see 5, it means £5,000, and so on. And then we're going to represent this information. We'll draw 2 separate box plots, one for the women, one for the men. Okay, so let's go then. What I might do is I might just let me show you how I'm going to draw it first, and then I'm going to probably zoom the diagram in so you wouldn't have access to these numbers while I draw. Okay, so first things first, let's draw the women's first. So the lowest value was 7,000, so we know that 7,000 will come. So we got 5, 6, 7,000 will be there. So I'm just basically going to choose a spot and put a mark there. So that's my 7. Actually, just undo that. Okay, so this is my 7,000 mark here. Then I've got the lower quartile at 14,000 for the women. So I'll just put a mark here on the same line, 14,000. The median salary for the women was 16,000, so 15, and there's 16,000 there. The upper quartile is £21,500 for the women. So I'll go to 20,000 and a half. Sorry, let's undo that. Yep, make that look a little bit neater. As close as we're going to get. And the highest paid woman was £33,500. So 33.5 should put us there. Right, I'm just going to pause the video and draw the box plot. Okay, so here we have the box plot for the women. And from our box plot you can see the lowest paid woman, they're at £7,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. The lower quartile at 14,000, or median is there. Our upper quartile at £21,500 and £33,500 for the highest paid woman. So this is our box plot. Now, before I start going into the one for the men, let's talk about this box plot here then and see what sort of information we've got. What we've actually got here is something telling us that the average woman from the sample that we've taken is being paid £16,000. That's the average wage that the women are getting. We've got, this is not exactly in the middle, so this is skewed a little bit on the positive side, which means that you've got within this interquartile range here from our Q3 to our Q1, you've got more women being paid more than £16,000. Okay, between 16 and 21,500 pounds. So most of your women are being paid that much. Not very many women are being paid below £16,000. So that's why this little box is small and this one is so big. But it still shows quite a spread here, because from 14,000 to 21,500 pounds, it means that there is 7,500 pounds of movement between what the women are being paid. Okay, so that's the interquartile range for the women. It's 7,500 pounds. So that tells you that you've got quite a big, well, I shouldn't really say it's that big when we're talking about this kind of money. It's, in my mind, it's fairly small interquartile range, which means that you've got a nice tightly packed group of women here who are being paid between 14,000 and 21,500 pounds. But more of those women are being paid above the average of 16,000. Whether or not they're happy in the workplace, I don't know. But the highest woman, she's being paid quite a bit there. Okay, let's get the men sorted out now. And for this one, I'll just zoom out a little bit just to show you what the men are being paid. And then what I'll do is I'll just plot the graph without you seeing that. I'll just pause it and plot it. So here, the man with the lowest amount of money is 6,500. Q1 is 16,000. Q2, or your median, is 20,000, 22,000. And then we've got 44,500 pounds. So I'll just pause the video and I will just plot the graph. Okay, so here we have the box plot for the men, and it looks vastly different from the women. So let's comment on what we've actually got here, and feel free to pause the video. I won't be writing any of this down for you, but feel free to pause the video at any point. I might jot down some basic bits of information, but let's just say you're answering this in an exam. These are the things you're going to say. First of all, what you can say here, just by looking at this information, is let's analyze the men first, just the same way we did the women. We can see that on average, the men in this sample are being paid about £20,000 in general. So they're being paid about £20,000 on average, okay, because that's where the median is. This is the median here. The upper quartile is £22,000. The lower quartile is £16,000, which basically only gives us about £6,000 as an interquartile range. So there's not a lot of spread here at all. So this is quite tight. This is quite a tightly packed group of men here, receiving this money. And you tend to have a negative skew here. So more men are being paid less than the average wage for the men than there are more. So basically you can see here that you've got quite a few men in here being paid less money than what the average is. Now, you've got quite a long whisker here going all the way over to the end, giving you a like this man that's being paid, he's being paid a lot of money above and beyond basically everyone else in this sample. So let's just say you're commenting on this in an exam. The first thing that you will want to comment on would be the average wage. And you will write a sentence along the lines of saying that the men on average are being paid more than the women, because the average wage for the men is £20,000, but for women is £16,000. So I'm just going to write this in short. So men are getting on average £20,000, whereas the women are getting on average £16,000. So that's one comment that you might want to make on that. You might want to comment on the range of salary or the interquartile range, but you're not going to say interquartile range, just call it the range if you want to. Okay, so for the men, their salary range is only about £6,000. But for the women, when I mentioned it before, it is £7,500. Okay, so you might want to comment on the range, and what I will say in here, it's generally the men have got a shorter range or a shorter spread or a smaller spread in their data than the women, which tells us that if you had to compare the two, the men's data will be more accurate because you have a much smaller spread. Okay, so this is much shorter than that one is. Okay, so that's another thing that you might want to mention. You might want to mention that in general, men are being paid more than women because, as you can see, look at where the women's box is. It's from 21,000 to about 14,000 there. But in general, the men's box is further along this line than women. So in general, men are being paid more, where you find that the top man is being paid considerably more than the top woman. Okay, so you might want to mention that. You might also want to mention that on the lower end of the scale, the woman who's being paid the lowest is earning £500 more than the man who is being paid the lowest amount of money. So you might want to comment on that. You might want to comment on the fact that for the average for the women, more women are being paid above the average than there are for men on their average, because you have more men are being paid less on the average for men. That's because you got this bigger space here. The line is not exactly down the middle. So somewhere along the line, some fairness is not happening here, because you've got, ideally you want the median to be in the middle, but it's not in the middle, telling you that there are more men on this side of the median that's being paid less money than the average. And just the same way, more women are being paid more on the average there. So I think I've given you more than enough information here. Usually in the exam, they will ask you to comment on 3 things, and I know I have given you more than 3 things to comment on. So make sure you really understand how box plots actually work and use them in answering questions. All right, that is it for now. Hope that this was straightforward enough for you. Any questions, please let me know.